I really wasn't an amazing student growing up. I really couldn't sit. And I think back then they just sort of dealt with you differently, but I had a very hard time sitting in class, and a lot of teachers thought that I was not much. Principal, I lived in his office. There was a seminar at the end of the year, and the school didn't pick me to go. I thought I was a nice guy, but I just wasn't a good student. It was like a big deal, and they didn't pick me, and I was really broken from it. And I shouldn't have been, but I was, because it almost sent a message to me that we don't want you around younger people. Like, we don't think you're a role model. And I just didn't see myself as being a bad kid. Like, I saw myself as being bad at class, but not a bad kid. And that distinction is major that a lot of, I think, kids go through. I think a lot of kids think that, like, if they're not good at class, then they're not good. And listen, you have to try and you have to do your best in class, but like sitting for many, many hours doesn't necessarily determine how good you are as a person, I don't think. And I think that's a big deal. I think a lot of people give up early. A lot of people give up early. A lot of people sitting in school systems, and they just give up on themselves too early. And they give up on Hashem early because they're sitting in front of a Gemara they can't understand, and they just assume that, like, the entirety of Yiddishkeit is contingent on them hopping Gemara at a pace that may be a little bit too quick for them. It's not the case. Like, you have to work hard in Yiddishkeit, but the idea that Hashem created you in a way that He doesn't want you and we don't need you, it's just not real. And I think that's a big issue.
Hi everybody, it's Aryeh Fingerer, and welcome back to the Jewish and Joyful Podcast. Today I sat down with Charlie Harary. Charlie Harary is a world-renowned speaker, incredible person, very inspirational. We sat down to have a meaningful conversation about life, about challenges, so I hope you'll enjoy. Please follow and subscribe for more. Please hit that follow button, comment, share. Please remember to subscribe to Parsha Knowledge, incredible weekly Torah publication delivered to you every single week for free. You could email parshaknowledge@gmail.com, or you can visit parshaknowledge.com. Ohr Olam Mishnah Berurah, incredible, life-changing Mishnah Berurah. You can visit the website ohr-olam.org. Check it out, and I hope you'll enjoy this episode with Charlie Harary. Welcome. It's a great honor, privilege to have you on our podcast.
Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Sure. So could you please take us back, before we get into our discussion, can you take us back to your childhood, where you grew up?
I grew up in Canarsie, Brooklyn. Went to Yeshiva Flatbush. Then went to Aryeh Fingerer. And then went to Yeshiva Aryeh Fingerer, the old city. And then I came back and lived in Queens. First I came back, went to Queens College and Shayashuv. And then I moved to Queens, and then from Queens to the Five Towns.
So from all this, were you always into public speaking? Did you eventually get into it? How did it all start?
It's all from Hashem. Whatever He sends. There was no, there's always a desire to try to be helpful, and every second really just comes from Him. So whenever He gives an opportunity, it happens, and when He doesn't, it doesn't. And if I think I'm saying something that I own, usually it doesn't come out. And I think the process is really just trying to recognize more and more that la'adam archei lev, but me'Hashem maneh Hashem.
So back to your childhood, from your experiences growing up and in today's 21st century and all the crazy things going on in the world, how do you say is the best way to raise children? Because there's so many things that could get in the way, and so many things that could deter people from being happy. So what do you think is the best way?
What's the best way to raise children? That's a good question. There is, listen, at the end of the day, every child needs something different, in my opinion. The hardest part, I think, today that kids are going through, there's a couple of things that I think are difficult for children today. One is the level of information being thrown at them. When I grew up, we didn't have phones. We didn't have cell phones, that's for sure. In fact, when I was in 8th grade, the car phone came out. It was like the biggest deal in the world to have a phone attached to, the glove compartment in your car. Like, it was not a normal thing. So just to give a sense of, like, when you went to school, you didn't have a phone. When you went to Eretz Yisrael, you didn't have a phone. So the information that we got was so slow and so little compared to what happens today. And that's tremendous, because it gets kids gives them the ability to grow up without, like, a deluge of information that hits every second. So it's harder, I think, for kids today, because they're always being compared more and more and more, not just to their peer group anymore, but to everyone they know from a screen. Um, Science is coming out left and right with this now about just what it's doing to children. So the first thing that we have to realize is that there's a lot of information that's hitting kids today. Um, I think everyone's a lot busier, but I think at the end of the day, if kids are seeing role models that love them and that love Hashem again and again and again in their home and in their yeshivas, it starts to set an impression that they're beloved in the eyes of Hashem, especially as a kid growing up. That's a critical thing to allow you to grow.
Thank you, because there are so many young adults, and there's also maybe children, and they think that the non-Jewish life is better. They think that if they have the opportunity to party and to do whatever they want, then they'll have much more fun, unlimited access to whatever they want. But we're Jewish, so we have to pray. They said we have to learn. We have to listen to the Torah. And I personally know many people who, from the other side of the spectrum, they were like that, and now they want to become Jewish. They want to become from through Kir, whatever it is. So how do we like? How would you say we should encourage other people, and how should parents tell their children this? And how all of us on a personal level, how do we recognize how important it is to be a Jew and live a happy
Sure.
life?
So let's break this down for a minute and let's sort of get where it's coming from. So if you can just sort of picture that there's two parts of us, there's the physical part and the spiritual part, right? Um, the physical part likes things that are sensory, and the pleasure we get physically takes a second or whatever, but it's temporary and it's sensory, so it feels quicker, better. So if you eat something and it's tasty, you get it immediately, but it only lasts as long as you're eating it. So you go to a shmorg at a wedding and you're starving and you pound and you're loving it, but by the chuppah you're already done because the feeling you get when you eat only feels good while you're eating. So if we could just create a paradigm here, physical pleasure feels good as you sense it and then goes away. Now, when it goes away, you feel empty. So what happens is you say, okay, what do I do now? So you go, oh, I just had pleasure a minute ago. I know what to do. I got to keep on eating, which is what people do a lot, like on Shabbos, right? Or like other places, like you're done, but I'm not sick. I'm gonna keep on pounding. Well, why do you do that for? The answer is because I like the way it feels going down, and it stopped. So I have a record of how I felt a minute ago in my head. Let's just keep on doing that. Now, the problem is that it never actually feels good. It's physical. It's limiting. So you got to keep on doing it. But then after a while, that doesn't become great. So you got to up it. So now it's not just eating pizza. You got to be more sophisticated, right? And then, so what happens when people engage in this type of lifestyle, which is what the world wants you to engage in, because that's how you buy stuff, you never end. You're in a loop for the rest of your life. Like it never goes away. When you're 8 and you start eating candy, and then when you're 9 and 10, when you're adult and you're playing hard because that's what gives you the momentary pleasure. When it goes away and that emptiness sits in, you go back for more. It never ends. So
Mhm.
the kid sitting in yeshiva going, "Oh, I know why I don't feel great because I need more pleasure." He's making or she's making a really bad assumption that more sensory pleasure is what they're lacking. And so when you go out into the world and then you meet people who have been doing this their whole lives and they look at you and they're like, "What? What are you talking about?" Like you read books and studies and you actually meet human beings that are mid-age and a lot of their life has no real meaning. They'll look at you like you're crazy. They have everything, but at that point, when you're in the loop for so long, you stop buying it. And if you need proof, just look at the people at the highest echelons of the entire country. Like go to Hollywood and see how many people are sitting around, like, saying like, that are besimcha tamid. Like
Right.
go you when you learn about the people that have achieved everything that people dream of physically, they're of the most depressed because they've achieved it all. And they realize that it's not giving them any depth. What it means to be a yid is that a Kodesh Baruch Hu gives you a soul. That soul's a connection to him. Now, just try this. Go out and see how it feels when you do things that are meaningful. When you hold a door for someone, or you give someone tzedakah, when you do things that are even low level spirituality, you feel better. And it's not even like it's not like you feel when you go out and you help somebody and the person looks at you and goes, "Thank you," or even doesn't, but you help somebody. It's not like you feel like this is a little bit better than the schmorg. It just feels categorically better because it's spiritual. Now, for a second, and think about this. Shem gives you a soul and says, I know the exercises to get your soul that you can feel every second. That means I can take you to the Olympics of how to feel spiritual, which means you'll feel addicted to something greater than this world can ever give you. And I know how to get there because I'm a world famous coach. I'm called Hashem, right? So I know it may not sound right, but neither does swimming in a pool for 8 hours a day. But I'm a coach, or neither does shooting shots or running upstairs in a stadium to win a championship. Like, or eating this food or that food. Like, nothing makes sense when you're doing things. Coaches don't have to explain themselves. But I think when you're younger, it's sort of harder to see that because you're not yet fully developed. So you quickly look at things that are Jewish and go, and you give up just a drop too early of what it feels like to build a really strong soul and to have a life in which you're living a spiritual life. Because when you live a spiritual life, your food tastes better and your relationships feel better and your day feels better. Your whole life is different. You walk in this world differently. But as you're growing up, it's a little bit hard because the effort that it takes against the chill and the quick fix that you get is just so much more, it's so much more exciting to not. And it's just like it's just like trying to play it at a professional level. As you train and train and train, at some point you're like, this is just too long, and you're almost there. And if you would have stuck it out, you'd be a Hall of Famer. And I think that's the challenge today. Is I think the world is so available that more and more young people who are on the path to incredible lives, it catches people too early. The desires, the other life. Once it sucks you in, at some point, what happens is you get addicted to it because the feeling of emptiness leads you to just get more stuff. Because to actually think that emptiness is that the whole system is not delivering for you is too hard. Wasn't I really wasn't an amazing student growing up. I really couldn't sit. And I think back then they just sort of dealt with you differently, but I had a very hard time sitting in class, and a lot of teachers thought that I was not much. Um, and the principal I lived in his office. But many times, listen, but many times I think the story there was that if I'm remembering it correctly, there was a seminar at the end of the year, and the school didn't pick me to go. Now, I wasn't a bad kid. I was involved in a lot of stuff. I was on the teams. I was involved in extracurriculars. I thought I was a nice guy, but I just wasn't a good student. So when they picked their roster of who got to go to the seminar, the way the school worked was they had a seminar where the seniors went with the freshmen. So it was like a big deal. And they didn't pick me. And I was really broken from it. And I shouldn't have been, but I was because it almost sent a message to me that you're not, we don't want you around younger people. Like, we don't think you're a role model. And I just didn't see myself as being a bad kid. Like, I saw myself as being bad at class, but not a bad kid. And that distinction is major that a lot of, I think, kids go through. I think a lot of kids think that, like, if they're not good at class, then they're not good. And listen, you have to try and you have to do your best in class, but like, I don't know, sitting for many, many hours doesn't necessarily determine how good you are as a person, I don't think.
Hmm.
Um, although you should try in class. So I remember seeing the list and being like broken and, call my mom and getting picked up and going home and pretending like I didn't care because I was too tough and this is stupid and who wants to go to this dumb seminar, or like, being broken inside,
Right.
as is the case when that happens to a lot of people. And then that night I got a phone call from one of my teachers. He was a ninth grade teacher. His name was Yotav Eliach. I got him ninth grade one. It was an elective. It wasn't even a full class. And he said to me, listen, I passed by the list today. I was looking at the list and I saw your name wasn't on it. Like, what were they thinking? Like, you're a really good kid. Like, they blew it. And and I remember thinking to myself when he said that to me that, like, holy cow, like, maybe I'm not a bad kid. And it was a major moment for me where, as a kid, your parents love you, but they're biased to you. To have a teacher like sort of go out of their way to remind you that your self-worth isn't based on your grades. At least the the way I grew up. Maybe it's different now, and maybe that's obvious, but it wasn't obvious when I was in school. It had a major impact on my life. It had a major impact on the impact it had on my life was just in the next 2 to 3 years when I was making some life decisions. That voice of really impacted decisions that I made. And I think that's a big deal. I think a lot of people give up early A
Mhm.
lot of people give up early. A lot of people sitting in school systems and they just give up on themselves too early. And they give up on Hashem early because they're sitting in front of a Gemara they can't understand. And they just assume that like the entirety of Yiddishkeit is contingent on them hopping Gemara at a pace that may be a little bit too quick for them. It's not the case. Like you have to work hard in Yiddishkeit, but the idea that Hashem created you in a way that he doesn't want you and we don't need you, it's just not real. And I think that's a big issue.
Yeah. We all want to enhance our Shabbos table. We all want to engage the family, the kids, the adults, everyone around. How do you do that? A lot of times it can be tough and challenging. I'd like to introduce to you to incredible inspiration for your Shabbos table. Parsha Knowledge provides an incredible, short and sweet Torah thought and an incredible story for your Shabbos table. It's good for kids of all ages. Baruch Hashem, it's inspiring thousands of people from around the world, people from all backgrounds, and Baruch Hashem, their feedback is so great. So if you'd like to get it for free, please email info@parshaknowledge.com. Just say, hey, I'd like to subscribe. Or you can visit the website parshaknowledge.com. This will, Bez Shem, change your Shabbos table. It will enhance it, and it will bring great, meaningful inspiration that will help you get through your week. For more information, please see the show notes and enjoy the rest of this episode. What would you say was the most stressful time of your career or your life, and how would you say did you overcome it, or did you overcome it the right way?
I don't know. Law school was super stressful. For 1L was super stressful. I worked at some of these big corporate law firms. Those were super stressful. Working late nights, a lot of hours. When I moved to RXR, we sold the company, and it was 6 months of just complete stress. I find in general that, at the end of the day, the biggest chizuk I got for when it comes to working hard is the Beis Halevi on Bitachon. If David Sutton has that book that he has the translation. I think honestly, I believe it's one of the most important books you have to have. I think it's required reading. And if I would give it to I think every person should have it in their house. Everyone should go through it at least once. There was a time I was going through it every single Shabbos. It was so good. And he translates the Beis Levi wrote a Kuntras on Bitachon, and he translated it. And his translation is amazing. His footnotes are awesome. And I remember learning it, and he says in there that what really struck me, and I think it's important to think this way, which is the two things that a lot of things stood out, but just relevant to this question is one is that fear of the world is potentially a lav. Like the Kush Baruch Hu, you're not allowed to have fear. Don't be scared of anybody. And fear brings challenges, right? The story in the Gemara where fear, one of the Amoraim were sighed, and I think it was from Nuna, looked at him and said, "You want to bring troubles upon yourself? Like what?" Like the sighing, the fear of the world is potentially a problem. And I think that's critical, is understanding that there's two types of stress, right? There's the stress of I got to get it done. Then there's the stress of like, will it work out?
Mhm.
And they're different. Where like I got to get it done is like I got to get it done. I've got 3 hours to get something done and that takes 4 hours. That's stressful, right? I got to drive down this highway and it's pouring rain. Stressful, right? Then there's like, what's going to be? Is it going to work out? Is it going to work out? Is it going to work out? Those are two different stresses, right? And the first stress is called life. The second stress is called faith.
Mhm.
And when you work on your amuna, so basically the second thing he says, amongst many, is that if you want to make a lot of money, you want to be wealthy, here's how you do it. Go get a job that makes sense for you, and then daven for more bracha. Like if you think that the extra money comes with extra work, you're wrong. It's a
Right.
tremendous chiddush. Ayin sham, if this is the first time you're ever hearing this concept. And the idea basically, I think that he's getting at, and that people need to get, is that this muscle called amuna, we like sort of put to the side. Like we sort of think we have it because like we believe that there is a Hashem, but like we don't understand that amuna is like it's a muscle. And if you work it out every single day, you're going to be a Superman or Superwoman. And having superpower strengths in Muna changes your whole life. And the area where it does most is in stress, because it isolates out the stress of what's going to be, why me, what's going to be, and it leaves you just for the stress of, can I get this done? And there's a lot of things in life that you can get done if you take that second stress out. But I think in life we skip Moon a little bit. I think we see Moon as like extra credit, or that I got it already.
Right.
And we never work really on bitachon. So I think that's really how you overcome challenges.
So just for understanding, what would you say is the difference between Amun and Bitachon? Amunah, we all know, is like faith. Bitachon is trust.
Yeah. So the way I see it is that Emunah is the belief in Hashem, that there is a Hashem, and Bitachon is the belief in His involvement in my life. Right. So Emunah is that Hashem runs the world and He's everywhere and He sees everything and He knows everything. It's in Him. It's
Right.
the Nakuda is Hashem. Bitachon is like, the word bitachon, security, right? Like I'm in His hands, His hashgacha, His providence, right? So you can believe in Hashem and say to yourself, like, you think Kodesh Baruch Hu's with me on the car line, like carpool? What are you, crazy? You think Hashem's like in my 11th grade test? Like, what does that even mean? Why would Hashem even care? That's Emunah. You have Emunah. You believe super strong that Hashem runs the world, but like, is He really? Does it really? Right? Like, does He really know my life? So that is Emunah and not bitachon. Then there's also bitachon, which is like, oh, Hashem's take care of me, but like you don't really believe that He's there. But like, you're sort of like almost like you like being out to lunch at drop. So like you just sort of use it. But when you have incredible emunah and bitachon, you believe very strongly that the Kodesh Baruch Hu is everywhere and is everything, and that He is directing every second of your life. Like Rav Rush's book, The Garden of Gratitude. Eli Friedman gave me this book, Thank You Hashem and See Miracles. Like you read that book and you see people with like real emunah, like crazy stuff happens to them, and they just thank Hashem for the crazy, terrible things in their lives, and then the whole thing just transforms and is amazing. Like that doesn't happen once; it happened like 100 times in his book, because these are people that live with bitachon.
Before we get back to this week's episode, I want to tell you about an incredible project called Ohr Olam. Ohr Olam provides an incredible, easy-to-read Hebrew-English translation of the Chafetz Chaim's Mishnah Berurah, and it's available to people of all learning levels, all backgrounds, and it's so insightful, and the way they did it is so beautiful and enhancing. There are so many different subjects of the Mishnah Berurah, so be sure to check it out. You could go to your local bookstore, just ask for Ohr Olam. I'm telling you, it will enhance your learning. If you're learning halacha, get it, check it out. Yeah, you'll love the notes, the pictures, the questions and answers in the back. And if you're not learning halacha yet, then do it. It says, whoever learns halachas every day, they'll be married to Olam Haba. So why don't you do it already? Go get it. Check it out. Ohr Olam Mishnah Berurah. It will change your way of learning Mishnah Berurah. Get it at a local bookstore. If you want to visit the website, you could also see some samples. It's r-olam.org. For more information, please see the show notes. Who would you say is the happiest person that you know?
I don't know. I think everyone has it differently. I think let me just redefine that. When you say happy, there are people that are super happy, but they're at the lunch. You know what I'm saying? Like they're sitting at a park right now, like they're just happy that the birds are eating out of their hands. And that's sweet. And that's wonderful for them. And I mean that. Like that's awesome. But I wouldn't say that they're the happiest people in the same way that I would say that a big tzaddik who's sitting and learning all day or doing tikkunim or helping people, but feels stress, but at the same time is connected to Hashem in a very deep way. Mm-hmm. So, happiness, the real simcha is simcha of mitzvah, simcha of Yiddishkeit. The real simcha is the manifestation of your soul. I'm close to Rabbi Nartzo or Moshe Levi. He's works incredibly hard in his avodas Hashem, incredibly happy, but his happiness comes from a deep-rooted connection to Hashem, right? The tzaddikim, they're happy when they're connected. And so that connection may look to an outsider as like stress because they're davening, and the outsider may be like, davening? Like, why would you daven for? Like, aren't you pumped for like no tachana? Like, happiness is the couch. So, but if you cut open that tzaddik's neshama, it's like the energy is flowing so wonderfully that he's overwhelmed. So there's different levels, but I think the happiness that we strive is spiritual happiness. That's really, I think, what we're all striving for. I think we're striving for a certain feeling of my day. And I think what really throws people and what drives unhappiness, I think, is mostly a sense of hopelessness and a sense of, I don't know which way is up. And especially if you get lost in that loop, that physical loop that we spoke about, and you somehow fall into that, then you really have a hard time because you bought that the next physical thing is going to give it to you, but it doesn't. And now you really don't know which way is up.
So what's the best way to get out of that? How do you pick yourself up?
This may sound like too obvious, but like I'm trying to find other ways, but there is no other way. It's really, 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 it's the basics. It's Torah, Tefillah, and mitzvos. Like, I mean it. Like, I really mean it. And I've seen it. Like, I've seen people that are completely unconnected, like slow themselves down, give themselves 15 minutes a day, put on tefillin, and like close their eyes and say, and they don't know how to read Hebrew, say Shema transliterated. And like they're coming out in tears. Like, it's in today's day and age, we like to like pretend that like if it feels good, it is good. And I believe very much that you should daven to Hashem in your own words too. But like a really always says to me, like keep Joseph daven in Hebrew if you can. Like
Right.
I believe that like, you should be a good person, but like there are these things that Hashem put into the system that are actual plugs into the wall of spirituality called mitzvos, called Torah and Tefillah. We may have a different relationship to them, but if you do them slowly and like with real intention, they do crazy stuff. Like really, like a good davening blows you up. You're stuck in a rut and you slow it down and you go take a little tiny piece of some safer and you sit there for an hour with a cup of coffee and you read it line by line until you get it. You say 10 Prakama Tehillim or one, it'll blow you up. Like it may not blow you up the first time, just like you're not going to get on a treadmill and run a marathon the first time. But we are constantly looking for like the next thing. And even with all the stuff out there, which is great, you can't replace the real stuff. The real stuff is the stuff that he gave us in our Sinai, Torah, Tefillah, Mitzvos. If you do, it's supposed to doing a million and do a million, but like at the same time and all before 9 o'clock or while you're on your phone, like if you slow them down and savor them, it'll break loops like you can't believe. Like this thing called tshuva is not a joke. It's not like, okay, fine, I got to get through it until Sukkot. Like
Right.
this thing, like it actually, you can walk out a different person and like it can really work. And you see people go through this all the time. Sometimes it's with tragedy, sometimes with the challenges, and then it turns them on. It happens all the time to every community that there are people that are like, hey, what am I doing? I want more. Like, let me go to Israel. Let me do this. Let me learn. Let me start a shir. Let me get involved. And like I see this all the time happening. And as people start to reconnect with real stuff, like Torah stuff in the right way, then a Shama catches fire. And then they break the loop.
Who or what would you say was your greatest inspiration and maybe even could have changed your life?
There are lots of who and whats, you know,
Anyone
Rabbi,
stick out?
Rabbi Levy, Rabbi Weinberger, Rabbi Brazil, Rakowski. I have along the way of my life were incredible rabbis and mentors that showed me things that I didn't know myself, that I looked up to, that sort of navigated me through different challenges, that pushed, that shared. Um, there's so many askanim that I look up to. Um, you know, it, there's so many.
Was there any advice that they gave you that stuck out and gave you a lot of inspiration?
I
I'm sure
think
they
the
gave you a
most thing that
lot.
they gave me is, and all of them, and even like I was starting my career, Moshe Bain, who was big Askin, was a mentor of mine and navigated me through being a lawyer and getting involved, and Aaron Wolfson and what he does for Claudius. There's so many people that are out there that are and I can't, I'm just thinking off the top of my head. I'm sure there's 100 more but they're everywhere. They're really everywhere. Everywhere you look are Jews that are going beyond themselves, that are pushing beyond their limits because they want to do more for people. That that's inspiring. When you see Jews give up their time and their money and their comfort and their calmness for somebody else, they're doing it because they believe in Hashem and they believe that we're all connected and that we're all brothers and sisters. That's super inspiring to me. Like really, like I get blown away with this stuff. I'm a real like I'm a sappy guy. Like I'm an emotional dude. Like I sit at a dinner of an organization I've never met before, and I'm like in tears. Like you know what I'm saying? Like I meet people and I'm like hearing their stories, like, and I'm going out of my mind. And they don't have to be like running an organization. They could just be like regular people that like love their children and learn hard and daven with kavana and like get stuck on like regular Jews are amazing people. Like just playing at this game. Like we forget that like Hashem wants us to be professional players. So like we forget because we're on the field all day that like it's not easy to be on this field, but it's meaningful and like just living as a frum Jew and or trying to grow. So it's a collection of all that stuff that I think inspires me.
What was the greatest advice you'll say you ever received?
The greatest advice I ever received. Um, it's another, I don't, it's this, it's not one, but each one has its own bit. Um, each one has its own
What
bit.
would you share with someone now with all the challenges now?
I think if I would share advice with people, it's there's a balance. Yeah, I got this from Rabbi Levi a lot. There's this balance between believing that Hashem loves you and wanting to work hard. Yeah, B'yam Darkecha, another incredible sefer that is, I think, required reading. Richard Meyer Morgenstern has a whole piece on this. And this is sort of like, I think, the underlying balance that I think everyone needs to sort of hit, which is, a lot of people think that Hashem just hates them and they're not enough, and they deal with that their whole lives. A lot of people think that Hashem just loves them and they are enough and they don't really grow because Hashem loves them. So, like, do you really have to get off your couch if Hashem loves you anyways? And I think there's a balance of, Hashem believes in you a lot. Now that comes from love, but I think it's a different way. And if you really believe that Hashem believes in you and he's pushing you and he's never going to settle, you don't grow because you feel bad. You grow because you feel good. That's really hard. That's how tzaddikim live. I believe how tzaddikim live. When I look at tzaddikim in my life, including Rabbi Levi and others, like that's how they live. And I honestly believe that that's the advice that I think it's hard for people to get. But if you got that, you'd get the balance. Meaning, because if you're a Jew and you think Hashem just hates you, it's gonna be really hard. You're running away, even though you're not running away. You come back when you feel guilty, but otherwise you're leaving. And if you're a Jew that thinks Hashem just loves you unconditionally, which he does, but like if he loves you and it makes you less, you're not going to achieve your tafkin, and you'll know it. But if you believe Hashem really believes in you, that means there's something about you that needs to come out. Hopefully it'll drive you to be like, well, what is that thing that he believes in? Like, what is the thing? Like, what does he believe in? And that will drive you to push, because you can't grow if you're not going to push. But you're not going to grow unless you believe in yourself. So that's the balance that I think it's hard for people to get. But if you got that balance, it's a different religion. If you see Elul, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur as a way to push yourself to the max, because there's something inside you that's going to come out that'll make you bigger and better than you were before, you're going to push yourself to the max, but you're doing it in a positive way. If you see it as like you push yourself or Hashem's going to zap you, then like you'll do it with like a half heart, and then like nothing will matter. And if you see yourself as like Hashem loves you anyways, you're just saying it because you're nervous to really work hard. And so if you can hit that balance, especially if you're young, I mean, that's really, really where it's at.
Is there one message, a final message of inspiration and hope they'd like to share?
I think we have to realize that we're here for a reason. It's the fourth quarter of Jewish history. And if your eyes are open, it's because Hashem needs you in the game. And most likely it's not to just get stuck in the loop. People have to really believe in themselves. And that's hard. But if you just sort of did the math and pulled back for like a minute and said to yourself, okay, there's 6 billion people in this world, and there's just a few million Jews, and we're all interconnected, and we have crazy stuff. And you look back in history and you go, look what's happening. Then you ask yourself, like, what's needed from me? And what can I do to make the world a little bit bigger and better spiritually? If we just thought that way, all of us, we just grow every single day, and we live much happier lives. Happiness is based on the meaning you put in your life. And when you're caught up in meaning, you don't have to be stuck in all the other stuff that brings us down. And if we got there, we'd be rocking. So let's rock.
Thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
I hope you all enjoyed this episode with Charlie Harary. I hope it gave you chizuk and inspiration, and if it did, please consider sharing it with friends and family to help spread the inspiration. Please comment, like, subscribe. Incredible episodes are coming out soon. Some more incredible things, so be sure to stay tuned. If you didn't watch our past videos, and check it out. If you'd like to dedicate an episode, please call 646-397-2320 or email us at info@parshanowledge.com. Be sure to check out Parsha Knowledge, inspiration that's changing thousands of Shabbos tables from around the world. You can email info@parshanowledge.com or visit parshanowledge.com. And make sure to get the Ohr Olam Mishnah Berurah that's changing the way thousands of people learning Chavetz Chaim's Mishnah Berurah. It's a Hebrew-English Mishnah Berurah. Incredible pictures, elucidation, comments. So be sure to check it out. You can go to a local bookstore, visit the website, aryeh-fingerer.org. If you have any guest recommendations, please email us. Thank you so much for listening, and have a wonderful, happy day.